Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of the Timist Podcast Series. My name is James, and I am the Timist and the host of the thing you're currently listening to. In this episode, I have the honor of speaking with our very first watchmaker, who also happens to be the owner of the Seattle-based micro brand known as Typsim Watches. Together, we explore how architecture, design, and watchmaking share parallels and have overlapping similarities, but also how Matt himself transitioned from a career with its foundations firmly planted in the architecture space to the wondrous world of watchmaking and design. In addition to this, we learn of the herculean efforts that Matt had to go through in order to get his watches chronometry certified, and in the process becoming the first and only, so far, American watch brand to secure this rating. And if that's not enough, we also dive into the crazy collab that took place between Typsim and Seconde Seconde, resulting in the creation of a very limited timepiece. Now, sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack as we get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest today. He's a Seattle native, a watch collector, and our very first proper watchmaker who also happens to be the founder, owner, and principal designer of his very own watch brand. I'm thrilled to introduce to you all Matt from Typsim Watches. Matt, welcome. How are you this evening?
James, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, and I'm doing well, doing very well.
Glad to hear it. Thanks for, I feel underdressed. You are on point. You are looking sharp today.
It's an important interview. I gotta be on point.
None of that. No, 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 none of that. Come on. It's all chill. It's all fun and games. We have fun here. No stress, no worries. We're just two watch nerds talking watches and trying to enjoy it as much as we can. So no pressure, okay?
Yeah, good, good.
So Matt, our viewers and our listeners don't actually know this, but you and I had talked once before in the past, and I found out that you are actually an architect by trade. So I'm curious because I want to get to know you a little bit more, and I want to introduce you to our listeners and our viewers and have them know you a bit more. There are some traits that overlap between watchmaking and architecture. Can you tell us a bit more about what it takes and how one goes about conceptualizing and sort of designing a watch? Any parallels between watches and architecture?
Well, yeah, I'm guilty as charged. I'm an architect, unfortunately. I could and it's been a lifelong pursuit for me. I've been architecting for going on almost 20 years, and I've been in the design world for a quarter century doing design work, learning to be a designer, learning to be an architect. And it's what I think is interesting is I recently read an article about is architects lamenting that we're not polymaths anymore. That
Mm,
once the architect was the master builder, the master designer, the master craftsman, all merged into one, engineering and designing and creating space. And when you look back to that, of course it was true. And of course we've seen architecture and design evolve over time to be something that's maybe more specialized. We rely on consultants, we coordinate with people, but ultimately, we're designers. We're through and through, we're designers. We've been designers historically, we're designers today. And how we design and how we work with people, maybe it's different, but it's all about creating that something. And so you said there's certain pieces of that might overlap. And I think it's absolutely true. In its purest sense, as an architect, I'm a designer. And as a watchmaker, as a watch designer, I'm a designer. And I think design is the language that overlaps between everything that you do when you're in a creative field. So that, of course, it's universal between the two. The the other piece of this, and the reason I brought up the polymath and the architect that does it all, is I took a little bit of an issue with the article because it's lamenting we're not living in ancient Egypt or whatever it might have been positing about being a multiple trades kind of designer. Um, and I think that lament misses the point. Today, as an architect, as a designer, we do continue to manifest and create space out of material. And this is the foremost of what we do. But we're also project managers. We're orators and presenters. We're financiers trying to figure out how to run a business. We're marketers. We're promoters. And we're graphic designers. We do so many different things as an architect that, yeah, maybe we're not a master woodworker and architect at the same time, but maybe now we're something else and we are a polymath when it comes to doing multiple other things. And I think it's that kind of ability to work between so many different trades, wear so many different hats, and bring design together at the end of the day that when I lean over and I start to design watches and to start to think about horological timepieces of these capsules of time on our wrists, again, maybe I'm still designing objects or space out of a material, which is fundamental to what I do as an architect, but now I'm coordinating within the parameters and the engineering of a watch movement, a watch case, and the materials that are associated with that. So is it different? Of course, but is it also the same? Yes, we're speaking that fundamental language of how do you design something out of nothing?
And then make it.
Right.
And then make it because that's an additional layer and sort of filter that you have to apply within your specific trade because not only is it a design exercise to take it from what resides in your brain, but now you transfer it onto graphing paper and then you actually, in your case, go about building it,
Right. Right.
which I think is very cool. Thank you for that in-depth response.
Maybe too in depth.
No, no, I appreciate it. And I think our viewers and our listeners will as well. Um, Before we dive any deeper, however, tell us exactly how your watch journey began because you started out as a youngling and you're like, yep, architecture, that's my jam. But then there was a shift. When did that shift actually happen and how did it happen?
Yeah, I wish I could say I was young and I said I'm a first grader and I played with Legos and I knew it. I was going destined to be an architect and maybe that's not totally true. Maybe I thought about being a dentist first and went to architecture school instead. Who knows? But my watch journey, how did I move from focusing on architecture to watches? And it's not really a move. I think when I look back to my earliest memories, watches have always been something that fascinate me. They catch my attention. They connect. I connect with them, and as in elementary school, middle school, I always had a watch on my wrist. Maybe it wasn't the most expensive. It wasn't something orologically complex, but it was still watches. And go to the mall, go to outlet shopping with my family, and what was the first store I dropped into? It would be a Fossil watch store. And so I've always had a love for these things. And you fast forward to getting through college, getting my first mechanical watch, loving the thing, graduating from architecture school, traveling to Switzerland, getting a Max Build Junghans watch, and these it builds. It becomes something that you're connecting with and fascinated with at different levels as you evolve through your life. And I think it was 9 years ago, 8 years ago now, that I was looking back to one of my first mechanical watch is a 1940s Wittenauer military watch,
Oh, wow.
and it had the worst loom on it. And again, kind of going back to what does it mean to be an architect? Maybe we're a little bit egotistical. Maybe we think we can do it all because we dabble in so many things. And so I looked at this loom and I think to myself, well, I can definitely fix that. Little did I know as soon as I opened the case back and see how complex things are, have no idea how to take a movement out of the case. I think this isn't going to work for me. I can't just fix this.
How old were you at this point?
Makes it sound like I'm a kid. I'm 9 years ago, but I'm in my mid 30s.
Okay, okay, okay.
And it's the same time that my son was just a couple of years old, and life changes then.
Mm,
You don't have the ability to do anything you want after 5 p.m. You've got to beat the witching hour before they get too crazy and you get them to sleep, and then you want to keep the house silent because, well, you don't want to wake them up.
right.
And I I kind of had to make a choice of was I gonna kick back and watch Netflix and kind of wait till the next day to start, or was I gonna find something to tinker on, something to work on, something to learn about? And it was the that catalyst of saying, "Oh, I want to fix this watch." Having time on my hands in the evenings during kind of that quiet period and saying, "Well, let's just jump into working on watches." And so it was just diving right in, searching for at the time YouTube videos, falling into the watch repair channel, falling into the watch repair forums, getting into NAWCC. We have got local watchmaking school here, starting to go to their meetings and connect with the watchmakers in the area. So I was very fortunate that not only am I learning about this in a time where the resources they're just so abundant online and they're so detailed and thorough. But I also live in Seattle where we've got it's two watchmaking schools.
Mhm.
And so there's an abundance of people going in and learning it. There's teachers here and there's watchmakers here. And so as questions come up, as they host meetings that they open it up to the public, I can start to pick their brain, become friends with them, and learn through mentorship and just asking questions. And so I let that journey just take me further and further and further, where I was buying cheap Asian movements and Asian watches from eBay, figuring out how to tear them down, break them every time, rebuild them, buy new parts, rebuild it, fix it, buy a new one. I fell down a rabbit hole of kit watches and buying the components and building up a watch, Seiko mods, and eventually started buying broken watches and wanting to endeavor to fix these things. I think the moment I felt that these things were happening in a way that was a bit meaningful and I could level up with each kind of stretch, it was the Omega Speedmaster Reduced. So this is the watch that's got the Du Bois de Praz module on it. And so it's not just a straightforward chronograph like you might get at ETA 7750. Terrific, straightforward movement. You just work on it. But when you look at the DD module, you have a base movement, automatic base movement, and then on top of that, they sit a chronograph module. And that chronograph module, it's cool, but it is completely unintuitive. It's not like looking at Valjoux 72 or the ETA 7750, where you can see what each arm and hammer and spring is working to manipulate with. There's a lot of hidden actions, I'll
Mm.
say, happening within that module. There's not a lot of parts available. There's not a lot of literature. And, I didn't know what I was getting into, but I bought a broken one, decided I'm gonna work like crazy to fix this thing. And I did. It was successful. And I think that was a moment where I said, if I just sometimes invest and push and stretch on this, something could happen. I could learn something. I could push and develop something. And I just kept pushing that and taking that to the next step.
So, what I'm taking from this is that failure is the best teacher.
Oh, certainly it is. It's so frustrating. So I'm like we said, I'm an architect. I go
Yeah.
to an architect by day. I come home at night, dinner with the family, hang out with my kids, and then in the evenings get to working on watches. And failure, great teacher, but there's nothing more frustrating than working on a watch and discovering you need a new part or something breaks at 11 p.m. at night and you just can't do anything
You're done.
except wait till the next day
Yeah.
to talk to somebody to order it or find something to do about it.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. I mean, I think we can all relate in certain respects how we may have, cracked our knuckles and settled in to go do a thing, and then we start doing the thing, and then curveball, you can no longer progress any further, right? You
Right.
basically you hit a checkpoint, save, close down the application, walk away because you're done for now. And it is frustrating, but I think it also teaches us to be persistent and creative to potentially solve things in manners in ways that are not really orthodox or the accepted norm. But I also want to emphasize the tenacity and the drive that you had in pursuing the knowledge, right? I don't want to say fall down the rabbit hole, but seeking out information and channels where you can learn, finding individuals that have the skills and the experience that you can ask the questions and then absorb that knowledge and then immediately turn around and apply it the next day, hands on within your shop. I think that's very cool, and I think um, there's lessons there to be learned for people that maybe um, are failure at, averse. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just try. Just start and see where it gets you.
Sometimes you just got to go into it. Just got to try.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for that. I do want to know a little bit more about Tipsum as a whole. I have to ask because the Tipsum logo itself, I know there's a connection to architecture, but please tell our listeners, tell our viewers a bit more about it because it's a very interesting logo and I know that there's a connection there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the name, the logo, everything about it. So Tipsim, this is something. It's a design endeavor that I founded with a couple of architectural colleagues back in 2006, 2005, and it was originally just a push to do design, to put all of our extra efforts into doing design ideas. And it might took the form of a architectural competition, a modification to somebody's home,
Mm,
furniture design. And that continued to evolve through my life, where people have come and gone and participated, collaborated, but eventually it just became my kind of side design opportunity, let's
mm,
say.
mhm,
And the name and the logo didn't exist at this time, but the name was kind of it was something where taking architectural jargon. We say typical when we're trying to reference things that are occurring multiple times. We use the term similar. And I took the two abbreviations for that, tip and sim, and brought that together to create the name Tipsim. The
nice.
logo, this is something that I developed when I decided to move Tipsim towards watch design and watch making. And at that time, I knew I needed a logo. I needed something to be at the masthead. And for me, it it felt good to connect it to architecture, to find something within the context of how we draw and represent within architecture. And so the split circle, this is a reference marker. And this is how, when we are doing architectural drawings, we can tag something with that reference marker and tell you to go look at another detail or another drawing or a bit of information. And I thought there was something not only playfully connective to the name Tipsim to pull that out as the logo, but even abstracted when you see the split circle, you can think of, well, maybe this is like Blancpain's moisture indicator, or maybe
Mm.
this is like a nautical symbol, or maybe it's got some other connotation or context. And I think it's nice that it has that ambiguity, some playfulness that you can imagine, well, maybe it's this, maybe it connects to that. And I like that.
That's very cool. I think there's a certain element tied to self discovery. It's an element that a lot of game theory and game designers use when crafting a story or a world where um, you can have 15, 20 minutes of exposition where we tell you all the things, and it's a lot. Or we can tell you just enough to pique your curiosity, to have you explore and dig through and learn on your own. And then the reward is all the more grandiose. It feels earned because You discovered it. You now have this tidbit of knowledge. I feel like the logo in and of itself. I mean, now you did explain it to our listeners and our viewers. Yes, it's true,
Oh,
but
the secret's out.
secret's out. But I feel like there's some magic and some allure and some mystique around. What is that? What is that? Well, go ahead and try to do a little bit of research. And hey, it's a marker. It's a. There's more to this. See here. Most of us appreciate watches and love them for what they are. Um, but you actually have to go a step beyond that and have undoubtedly run into issues, right? As a watchmaker, roadblocks, setbacks, and the like, while trying to design and build your watches. Um, can you tell us a bit more about navigating these waters and any challenges that you may have faced, in the past? Because again, you have the idea, you have the vision, you think you have all the Lego pieces, and then you go and do the thing. And you mentioned a little bit earlier where there's a lot of hidden things, like a lot of hidden mechanisms or operations that are not initially made clear. Like, oh, if you pull this, that will happen. Can you give us any examples or some scenarios where you've like, you know what, I thought I had it, and then this happened.
Yeah, it's boy, the challenge is all over the place. You know, I feel like I can't answer this question without just diving a little bit to why and when I started this.
Yeah,
And
please.
I can only imagine there's been a big influx of micro brands and small watchmakers coming to market since the pandemic when everybody went home and in some lucky opportunities had lots of extra time to develop something new, or they decided to find a new path in life and whatever it might be. But this was not necessarily me. I was definitely impacted and fell in line with that the issues of the pandemic. But I decided to start this in fall of 2019, so just shortly before. And in starting this, in starting Typsim and moving to watches with it, it it was something of a passion pursuit for me, something that I wanted to express myself, my design concepts, my design ideas through watches and represent what was meaningful to me in a watch. And I'm coming at this, we talked about it. Architects have certain similarities, but I'm coming to the market, to the whole profession of watch brands completely foreign. I don't
Mhm.
know who manufactures, I don't know where to get things, I don't know how to connect with people. And I had to do just so much research, so much reaching out, interviewing manufacturers, connecting with other micro brands that would be willing to offer up some ideas and help in navigating this world. And it was it got me to the start of 2020. I found a manufacturer, and like I said, I was impacted by COVID in the way that that manufacturer fell through and they went out of business, and I had to find a second manufacturer. And even that process, that was it was really difficult. Um, I I like to approach design problems with the highest and best. I like to approach it with a design vision and a concept that I want to achieve, and then I want to make it happen. And there could be technical issues, there can be, as an architect, building code issues, and I don't see these as necessarily roadblocks. I see these as, let's say, opportunities to solve how to make it happen within the constraints of what's in front of me. And so making my watches was the same thing. Um, I I had a vision of a watch that would express itself. It would tell your story. It was not an immutable object. And we can maybe touch on this a little bit. The what I see so much out of modern watches is a desire to create immutable objects.
Hmm.
And to me, I can't connect with that. I think there is something beautiful about sheer efficiency and sheer precision. It's don't get me wrong, this is a beautiful thing in its own right. But when it comes to something, an object that I'm meant to connect with, that's traveling through time with me, that's a part of my story, of my experiences, um, it something's lost for me. And this is something why I connect to vintage watches so much, that they are mutable, that they're made out of materials that transform with time. And to me, this is very acceptable. This is noteworthy. This is important. And so when I wanted to create Typsim watches, I wanted to be able to offer people the opportunity to connect to watches that way. Because I can't imagine the meaningfulness of it any other way. But not everybody makes acrylic crystals. Not everybody will do a gilt dial. And when I say gilt dial, it's not the a Tudor gilt dial where it's a really beautifully executed dial with metallic paint put on top of it. It's a gilt dial that's exposing a polished dial plate below. It's a technique. It's a process that I think it kind of had its heyday in the 60s and fell out of favor.
Mm.
And if I had to speculate, it's probably a monetary efficiency thing, and maybe people thought there were better techniques. But I find a certain beauty in that, the way that when you expose the metal below, it takes on a life of its own. You're using lacquers, and it's a tremendous process to create a dial. Um, and it's these little details, these material techniques that people are using, that you could be using, that nobody's manufacturing. And so when you reach out to people, it was often a hard no. And this would
Mm.
be from some of the biggest names that are representing 90% of micro brands around the world out of Switzerland. They're not interested in doing acrylic crystals necessarily.
Mm.
And so I had to seek out a partner that would be willing to help me achieve the vision and then test that to make sure that what we're creating, it's not like the waterproof or water resistance of a 60 skin diver that claims 100 meters and really can get like one or two. It's making sure that we're doing processes that work these days, but doing it with a material and kind of a design concept that I'm trying to achieve. And I know I've gone on a major tangent here, but
Oh, it's fine. Don't worry. Hey, we have the time.
so this is the kind of endeavor. This is why I push towards it, and these are the difficulties faced, is that it's I don't think everybody's just willing to jump in and say, "Oh, you've got an idea? Well,
Mhm.
yes, I'm going to do your idea for you." I think as a designer, you have to say, "I have an idea. I'm going to make this happen, and I'm gonna bring you in to collaborate, to bring you in to help with this thing." And I
Mm.
think it's really that mindset that is what sets you apart from being one type of a designer versus another that might say, "I've got an idea, but I'm going to kick it over to you and let you finish it." And that's good. I'm, hands off at that point. That's not me necessarily.
So this actually ties in beautifully into the next question that I have for you that just kind of organically manifested because you've been all around the world and you've been working with so many different industry professionals spanning the globe. And obviously, some are more eager than others to assist or provide insight. What are some of the most interesting and unexpected learnings that you've gathered over the years now that you've been doing this for a while? Character types, work styles, just general flavor of all the industry professionals that you've kind of reached out to or engaged with in some form or another, professional or not professional. Very curious.
Yeah, boy, there's a lot of ways I could go in with this answer. It's
Protecting the innocent, of course.
can't say anything bad about people, right?
Yeah, no, I probably wouldn't, but keep it real.
Yeah.
Just be your authentic self.
So you know, I lament that I don't know more languages. I English is my language. I rudimentary Portuguese, fine, and I can dabble in this and that. But I in going through working around the world, I only wish that I put more time into learning languages, because not only is it speaking their languages, but every time I go and I'm working with a partner in Hong Kong, in China, in Switzerland, in France, um, even connecting with people in England and Canada, I'm learning these new languages of business. I'm learning that each culture approaches doing business in different ways. And at first, I it wasn't expected. Naively on my part, I thought I could reach out to them the same way I might reach out to a structural engineer that's here in America to do architecture. But it's just not the case that everybody works a different way, and it blew my mind when I learned that China shuts down for Lunar New Year for a month, and you just nothing's going to happen. They're on break. Similarly, Switzerland, it shuts down for summer holiday for the watchmakers. They're done. I think it's is it mid-July through August, or I might be mixing up a little bit of a month there, but there's it's just accepted. And what is it here in America? We shut down for 0 days for 365 days a year. We just work. I don't know.
I think the closest thing is Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So there's these things that shock you, and you think, oh, okay, I'm going to plan out my schedule, and then suddenly you hit that sudden month-long break and everything gets delayed. Or you think you're negotiating, and the reality is the partner at the other country is just they're saying no, but you don't know they're saying no, or their expectation might be different than yours, and so it's just learning the nuances of this, and so that steep learning curve of business languages between countries is so real, it's so big, it's so huge, um, and I think there's probably perceptual differences or learnings that I feel like I have to talk about here. I know this subject bubbles up within watch forums, but
Mhm,
when you get something made out of China, it's not necessarily bad. It's not necessarily cheap.
mhm,
And I think the clearest example of this is when you buy an iPhone. It's a terrific piece of engineering, design, and manufacturing. It's awesome. I mean, I love the design. That's made in China. And there's no reason that all the other things that we get there that we manufactured there is going to be suddenly bad, but this is the only good thing that comes out of there. What I think I've learned is that they'll build to your price point. And so if I go over there and I say I want to watch and I want you to make the case really cheap and really fast, well, they'll say yes, and they'll give me a cheap, fastly made watch case.
mhm, mhm,
And what I've learned is to say, well, I don't want to pay cheap. I don't want it fast. I want it good.
mhm,
And I'm
mhm,
going to reject the QC of these cases if they're not to a certain standard. And then to go through prototyping, reviewing the cases, taking 10x macro photos of the finishing and the details and the edges and sending them back and saying, well, this is unacceptable. This needs to change. You need to manufacture it slightly differently. And having those conversations up front and accepting that I'm not going to pay as little as another brand might be willing to pay because they want to pay cheaper and they're not as concerned with those details.
mhm.
And so that's, I think, really important. It's really an important distinction of how you can work with different people and you can achieve really great results.
That's very interesting, and I'm glad that you brought up the topic because there's some stigma, right? And there's labels that get slapped on things very quickly. But it's interesting to learn that there are levels, like most things in life, to everything, including manufacturing watches out of China.
Right.
So I'm glad that you brought that up. It's also fascinating going back to the learning journey of languages. And it's not just the spoken word, but also the language of business that different countries and nations operate under. So that to me, again, I'm just trying to put together all these ingredients that you're putting on the table. And I'm like, wow, Matt, you did not know what you were signing up for in 2019 because there's so many things, right? From the diving into the forums and speaking with local watchmakers and doing research and finding suppliers and seeking out parts to now seeking out assistance and professional input from industry professionals that know what they're doing, and then understanding that they're not available for the entirety of the month. You're like, when can we talk? You're like, well, in about a month. And you're like, why? Oh, because we're all out. Nobody's here. So all these, like you say, not necessarily roadblocks, but opportunities to learn and to expand your sort of tool belt of experience sounds like quite the journey.
It, it is. And I think this might be the weird quirk about me is, and we alluded to it, that when you face failure, when you face difficulty, you have to lean in and say, well, I'm going to keep trying, I'm going to keep doing, or I'm going to work through this.
Hmm.
It, all of these things that I faced, these could each be an easy stopping point and say, well, that's not going to work.
Straight up, just all together.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Anything could be. But I find myself that I'm wildly encouraged by these these difficulties, these challenges. For example, I decided I wanted a chronometer watch, and I thought, well, for me, I think it's the coolest thing to know that your watch has gone through arduous testing, 15 days, multiple positions, temperatures, and it's coming out and it's keeping really super precise time. It's nerdy, but it's so cool to me. And of course, I think, okay, well, I'll buy movements. I'll work with Solida. I'll ask them to do cost certification for me, and it'll be great. It'll be cool. And of course, you learn that Kosk is not for everybody. This is for Swiss brands. It's for Swiss movements that's going into a Swiss watch. And that's not me. I had already made my choice that my watches, I was having cases coming out of China. I was doing all of the assembly here in my Seattle studio, and it just wasn't possible. I was not working with a Swiss brand. I'm not a Swiss brand. So then I had to reach out and find another place that would certify a chronometer. And there's three other places in the world that would do that. I'm going to forget the name of the location in Japan that does it. In Germany, it's in Glashütte, I believe, but I don't remember the observatory that it is. But the one that I worked with, I found was the Historic Observatory, Besançon Observatory in France. It's right there on the Swiss border. It's been around for over 150 years, and it's been on the forefront of doing chronometer testing, chronometer competitions, and it's continued to operate through all of this, certifying chronometers. And so I was able to connect with them. I was able to work with them and become the first and only American company to go to France and have watches certified with them. And what's cool about it is I don't send a movement to them and then the movement comes back to me. This is what Kosk does, and it's cool. It's fine. It's great for manufacturing and efficiency and cost. But I have to send them a complete watch. I have to assemble the whole thing, regulate the watch, and ensure that what I'm sending them, the complete watch, is going to pass the test. And so I think it adds this level of difficulty and complication that you might not see in the other certification processes. And to make this even crazier is this is at the mid to tail end of the pandemic. I've let my passport expire. I thought I had a courier set up to bring the watches there. That fell through. And so I'm getting my passport the same day that I'm flying out to France to hand deliver these watches to Besançon to have them tested. And going through the stresses and the hurdles to make sure these things arrive, they can be tested. Never testing these before outside of my studio, not knowing, is the situation going to be different? Are these going to pass? Did I just spend a week flying out to France for good wine and that's it? And so it's enormous challenges, but then you do it, you achieve it, and you think, well, what's next? What can I do more? How can I push this further? And so now this is something that I can tick a box and say I've done something pretty cool. now when I talk to other Swiss brands and I say, "Hey, guys, I want to do a perpetual calendar," and their immediate reaction is, "Well, we don't work with Americans. We don't do that." And I say, "Well, hold on, guys, hold on. I have an idea. I think we can do this. Let me show you my portfolio of what I've
Mm.
done, what I am doing." And I can show them what Typsim watches are like. I can show them the certification I'm achieving. And I wish I could speak French better and say regular and say I'm a regulator, but I can't. But I can point to that and say that I'm doing that work. And then I can point to the my watchmaking on the other side.
Yeah.
I can now point and say, I've I repair and service repeaters. I repair and service perpetual calendars. So the things that I want to work with you on to build, I'm working on them. There isn't anything that I'm not doing at this point except for getting those things from you so I can build the watches and create a potentially a Tipsum perpetual calendar, which would be pretty cool.
That is wild. That is so wild and so cool and super nerdy as well. Like I'm just like adventures in watchmaking. That should be a series that you create where you
Right?
go and we go and we reenact it, right? We reenact it like you're putting the watches in this like special case and like you have a little like 1960s hat, you put it on, it's a briefcase and you get on the plane. It's like a Pan Am flight and we you get there and you're just like you're handing the briefcase over and it's like these are my babies. But it
I wish
also, yeah.
I wish it was a Pan Am flight, but you funny you bring it up. So when I flew over there, I was so nervous that I spent what did I spend 4 or 5 weeks regulating and testing the watches here before heading over there.
Yeah.
And I was so nervous that getting on the plane, that the electrostatic or velocity or just who knows what would
Something.
affect
Yeah.
it. And so I bought electrostatic resistant foam to build from scratch a special case to put all of the watches in, and then wrapped it in this electrostatic fabric that would prevent anything from getting in there. And so I'm carrying on to the plane with this custom box that I've made stuffed with watches and foam that's protecting them from anything I could imagine.
That's incredible. I mean, Matt, you're a watch nerd through and through. I mean, that's passion and love if I ever seen it. It speaks, I think, to the passion and the love that you have for what you do, right? These are tiny wrist-worn objects that we quite literally pour time and essence and love and our souls into, right? We want them to be amazing and awesome. Even more so, someone that actually creates them from scratch, such as yourself. So I can totally see that. And I think it's not lost on anyone that's watching or listening that um, you view them as your children and you want to protect them and you're taking them to like you've been training them all year for the Olympics and now it's you're jumping on the flight to take them to the observatory so that you can get the certification. That's I think that's a story in and of itself. Like I think we should just reenact that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's very insightful and you're taking us behind the curtain and giving us a peek behind what it takes to, be a watchmaker of a certain caliber, pun not intended. Um, but trying to achieve greater than, what the norm is or what the standard is. And like kudos and props to you. Well done. I am moved. Like that's very, very cool.
You're too kind.
No, I'm truly, I'm being honest. It's fascinating, but also like speaking, because we're gonna go back a little bit. Speaking of when industry professionals, um, earlier, you actually partnered with folks will know this, some folks won't know this, but now they'll learn Seconde Seconde for a timepiece in the 200M, right?
Yeah.
What was that like? I think Seconde Seconde has like a artistic approach to things, and there's a certain recipe and vibe. I am curious to learn more about like how was that? How did that happen?
Yeah.
And what was that? What was that like?
You gotta love Instagram.
Yeah.
I stumbled on him, you're scrolling endlessly and it's not quite doom scrolling when you're looking at every possible watch avenue on Instagram. It's
Mhm.
joy scrolling. I don't know. But
Sure.
I stumble on Seconde Seconde Sword Hand.
Mm.
and I'm immediately obsessed. And so if your viewers don't know what I'm talking about, so Romerick, who is the artist behind Seconde Seconde, will make limited edition hands, or at least you got to start with limited edition hands. And these would be put into um, high hot horology from the 50s, 60s, 70s. So imagine a vintage Rolex with a cartoon Minecraft style sword replacing the hour hand.
As the hour hand, yeah.
And so it's to me, I was immediately struck by its irreverence, its playfulness, and juxtaposition. It hit every mark that art needs to hit. It's delightful. It's getting me to think I can create different connections in there. And he might have been thinking about one thing, but I'm connecting it to another. And it's just brilliant. I mean, I can't speak highly enough of his creativity. And so I bought one of his hands immediately, and then I had to go and buy myself a oyster date to put it into, and it's awesome. Fast forward a couple of years, and I've got Typsim going, and I got on his radar. I don't know how, but he paid attention to Typsim and he reached out to me. He cold called me.
Oh,
This wasn't
wow.
it
Very
wasn't the other
cool.
way around.
Very
And
cool.
he said, "Hey, are you open to a collaboration?" Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a that's a hard yes.
right.
Um, and so he reached out and he had some ideas, and there's nothing better than collaborating with another designer, somebody that's wildly creative, and being able to connect through the design process. So he sent over some sketches. I took some ideas, some notes. I sent him some sketches, and we worked back and forth until we were achieving his design concept, and we were both really excited about it and decided to push forward and make it happen. And of course, him being who he is, he's connected with everybody, and he
Mhm.
found another artist in France who got his start working on prosthetic eyes and
Oh,
doing the
wow.
hand painting of the irises. And he got him to come in and get involved in hand paint each dial with the comical faces.
Wow.
And so it's this awesome collaboration that comes together, and it was just really fun.
Yeah. Michael Jordan calls you and it's like, do you want to play a game of pickup? Do you want to, do you want to join in this? Yeah, you're going to say yes. That sounds wildly fun. You're bouncing ideas back and forth and things are clicking, firing on all cylinders, so to speak. That's awesome. Congrats. Like that's a huge achievement.
Yeah, it was so cool. It was that was
How many
I'm
units?
blessed. It was 15 total.
15. Very limited. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah, that was the intent. Tipson is not we're not a major manufacturer doing hundreds and thousands of watches. It's really pretty low production, so 15 made total sense for us.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it so much. I saw it on Instagram and again, it was a bit of a system shock. I think you're right. It did really what it was intended to do. And it's like, this is unlike anything you've seen before.
I
And I
guess I
think,
should explain. I mean, I don't know
yeah,
if you show a picture, but the Tipsim collaboration with Seconde Seconde was to take Tipsim and make it tipsy. And it was a play on the name. But then when you start thinking about the diver and you say, what's the play on the name to make it tipsy? Well, what about taking nitrogen narcosis and looking at the drunk feeling you achieve as you go down 50 meters, 100 meters? It's what they call it, the martini effect.
hmm.
And so you play on not only the name change, but then the idea of a diver and the feeling of nitrogen narcosis and get the drunk faces on there, the quote from Jacques Cousteau, and it all kind of ties together in a neat little bow.
No, I love it. It's so playful and so fun. And there will be an image that I'll superimpose on the screen so viewers can see it. Well done, bravo.
Thanks.
Which brings me to my next question is as a business owner, right? Specifically a watch business owner, having seen both sides of the proverbial counter as a watch fan that's, into these tiny machines and as someone who actively is trying to solve internal issues, as we've already discussed, sort of on a quest to make your next watch. What are some of the things that you yourself have learned to look out for when you're shopping for a watch? So, not necessarily building the next Typsim watch, but because of the journey, because of the learnings, because of the experience that you've gained, you now have a wealth of knowledge that you can rely on to go, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, but more importantly, what to look for as far as like that is a sign of maybe not for me, and then maybe share some of the reasons.
Yeah, and I think this is a good topic to manufacturing what I've learned about the making of watches.
Mm,
Manufacturers love to do what's easy, what they've done before, and what they can get done quickly.
mm,
Now, I think again, maybe you see it on the forums, maybe it's just the lament of other side conversations I have, but people look at watches today and they say, boy, they're so thick, or why is it so much space between the hands?
mm,
And I often offer up, well, it's because they want to make it quick. They want to be able to stamp those hands on, well, not stamp, but press those hands on very quickly. And to do that quickly, you can't have millimeters, half millimeters, micromillimeters coming together and just getting them so perfect and aligned together. But if you leave enough of a gap, you can press them on, move on to the next one, press it on, and be done very quickly without having to make adjustments, but move on. So what might take 30 seconds, 15 seconds, I don't know how long they can quickly press these down. That compared to what if it took a minute? That's 100% longer.
yeah.
That's one watch less they can make
So they
every.
build in that error of margin
Right,
and make it very wide, which in turn kind of translates to, well, things are thicker.
right. So it's fast production. So for me, when I look at these things, I see the margin of error and tolerances for fast manufacturing.
Mm,
I see when you look at bracelets, why were bracelets so thin and beautiful and comfortable from 1960, but now they're so big? Well, again, it's this margin of error and ease of construction. You have to start to think about how strong do they need to be? Okay, if they need to be X pounds per whatever strength for the steel, well, we don't want it to break. Let's add an extra safety factor of 30%.
mm.
And suddenly it balloons up the size, it balloons up the thickness. Now tack on to that how do they make this? Is it cast? Is it CNC cut? And when they're cutting it, what size tool are they using? Now, how often do they need to change that tool? Because those tools are very expensive. And so you have to start thinking like the manufacturer that if you make it bigger, thicker, easier to cast, less milling, less tool changes, well, suddenly, well, it's going to change that end result because it's so much easier, cheaper, faster to manufacture. And so I see that in watches today that if you go and you look at a new watch, somebody's made it, big brands, small brands, it doesn't matter, but you start to see certain thicknesses or tolerances or way something is cast. Well, I see the manufacturing process in that. And so I definitely do pay attention to that.
Interesting. That's a very intriguing filter to kind of apply to all of us in the future when we're looking at watches, no matter the brand or price ranges. Take a look at the tolerances, take a look at the thickness, and then extrapolate that into what that means.
And then I think there's another interesting piece to this, and this of course can extend to the cases, the case backs. Why is a case back so big and bubbly? Well, again, it's this margin of error, water resistance, etc. But I'm starting to see a little bit in dials that
Hmm.
when I will go and start prototyping different dials and asking for different finishes and designs, often one of them will get kicked back and it'll be a finish that's just not, it's not what I asked for.
Mhm.
But I'll notice it's a finish that's popping up across the watch industry. And so a good example of this is this it's like a pebbly hammered texture. I'm
Mhm.
sure you've seen it.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
almost looks like sand,
Mhm.
and I think Patek recently did it in one of their watches. Mosier, it's all over the place. Micro brands
Mhm.
galore.
Mhm.
And one of them got sent back like that. And I thought, well, that's not at all what I asked for. And it's popping up everywhere. This must be a new stamp. This must be a new texture, a new dial finish. And
Mm-hmm.
they're pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it just gives me pause because I don't know everything about manufacturing. I don't know where everybody's getting their dials or why, if one person does it, suddenly everybody's done it and then it's getting pushed out to me without asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
What's that about? I don't know, but it kind of points out something to me of, well, maybe something's going on that at a deeper level to the manufacturing and less the design and control of the watch brands themselves.
Interesting. Yeah, the question then obviously is born. Who who controls the design? Who like, where are we getting these trends, these influences, these updates? How much is it in the watchmaker's house's hands, and how much is it coming from the manufacturing facilities or design houses that sort of come up with the idea of like, let's introduce this scalloped or pebbled or what have you, fill in the blank design and see if we can make this, see if we can make fetch happen. See if we can make this thing
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And my experience with this is I like to tell the story about the case back design of the 200M. That
Mm-hmm.
I had a sketch, I had a design and sent that over to my manufacturing representative in Hong Kong, and they give me engineering assistance. And so they kind of cycled it through the manufacturing process, kick something back, and immediately it's thicker. Immediately there's more tolerances in there. And I think we went back and forth for 2, maybe 3 months of them kicking a sketch or an engineering drawing back to me. I'm redlining it, coming up with a new profile, sending it back to them, having them say, "Well, no, that doesn't work. That's not going to be waterproof. We can't do this." And it was just a tremendous negotiation of trying to extract from them the engineering criteria that they were working from, and then when they sent that over, reverse engineering it from their drawings to develop something that met the manufacturing and testing tolerances while achieving a thinner profile. And of course, if I was trained as a um, maybe a product designer engineer and I understood micromechanics even more thoroughly, I could get there a little bit quicker, but in this exchange, it's just this process of they could have controlled the design by just
Mm-hmm.
saying, well, it doesn't work, and me acquiescing and saying, oh, okay, well, I guess this is what it is. But again, this goes back to my nature of, well, you can say no to me, but you have to tell me why.
Mm-hmm.
And if the why doesn't lead to your solution, well, let's find a different one.
And that again comes back to these watches being your babies, these watches representing you and who you are and your brand, and wanting to make sure that if something is not possible, you fully understand why, and all avenues have been exhausted, and all the discussions and all the back and forth has happened. That's part of being driven and persistent and wanting to make sure that you give it your all.
Yeah. Yeah.
With that, though, do you have any advice or any, I call them golden nuggets of wisdom? I just come up with that. No one's ever said that in the history of ever.
Never.
Um, any advice that you've gained over the years that you can share with us? Yeah,
Not that.
life advice too. If you're like, you know what, never eat after 8 or something like that. I don't know. Really anything. You've garnered a lot of mileage in this industry and you've learned a lot. So I'm curious if there's any goodness, any golden nuggets of wisdom that you can share.
Yeah, there's so many. I'm getting to my golden years.
Stop it.
It's I think, and I think everybody says it, do what you love,
Mm,
follow your heart. And yeah, it sounds cliche for me to say it, and so maybe I'll try to say it in a different way.
hmm
And
hmm
what I would say is you're in this, you probably have a community of friends and like-minded geeks that love watches like we do. Well, go meet up with them and connect with them, have a coffee, have a beer, enjoy watches, talk about it, love walking around with your watch, and maybe get off social media for a little while and see what happens. I I'm amazed by how prone we are to hype
Mm,
and FOMO. That when you're on Instagram and you see an influencer, you see a colleague, you see a friend, and they get a certain watch and they're showing it off, and then you see other people doing that, and you're like, well, maybe I actually like that watch.
yeah.
Maybe you don't.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't.
Yep.
And maybe it's okay not to. Maybe it's okay to like it. I don't know. Maybe you've discovered it. But if you weren't there, just kind of staring at this stuff and feeling like you need to get likes or you need to get attention, beat the algorithm by showing something that everybody wants to comment on or like. Well, I think it changes the way we approach this.
Mm.
And what I think I've I'm coming to terms with or enjoying is I am a member of NAWCC. So it's the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors.
Here in
It's
Washington State.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
in Seattle, but
Yeah.
it's all over. I've
Yeah.
gone to
Yeah.
the national, and it's I'll say it's an older crowd, and that's okay. It's an older crowd, and they came up in a different generation, and they are obsessed with horology, with watches, with clocks, with the design of them, the function of them, everything about them. They love it with such passion. And you're not going to find them on Instagram. You're not going to
Mm.
find them on TikTok and showing off a video of what they're doing. You're going to find them at a face-to-face meeting where they're talking passionately and sharing and looking and handling these things. And I think I've learned to really appreciate that kind of interaction when it comes to a hobby like watches,
Hmm.
because it doesn't become about the superficial face of the object. It's not about the hype, it's not about the likes, it's not about the attention. It's just about passion and about being a part of this community. And I think, I'm not going to discredit what Instagram has or has not done or whatever it might be. It for sure it's connected me with people I never would have connected with. I've learned things, I've discovered things, and I think that's awesome. I think there's a place for it. And so where I'm going in this roundabout answer of my advice of following your heart is to hear what it's saying to you. I think you need to find balance in your life. You need to connect with people in different ways. You need to have have time, give pause and listen to yourself before you get into scrolling,
Mm.
before you get into obsessing over these images and thinking that that's telling you what to do. So I'd say don't let it.
Well said. Well said. Beautiful, actually. I will also add my perspective, and that is getting different perspectives from different people, and getting hands-on and listening, learning, and asking questions changes how I view this hobby as a whole. Like I've changed as we all do over time. I think our tastes and our experiences shape and mold us, but to your point, meeting people in person and talking watches and asking questions and seeing a myriad of timepieces spanning decades and eras is very, very different than seeing the latest hype piece drop and seeing a new watch alert and having not that all interactions on Instagram are as such, but having very quick, superficial congrats, well done, enjoy it, and then you move on versus
Yeah.
having a more, I don't know, intimate conversation, deep diving into a subject, learning about um, fill in the blank from people that you know have had watches from various eras. It's different.
Yeah, where
I'm
do you
not
go
saying,
for long form comments? Where do you see a watch? Somebody
yeah,
posts it. Instagram's not the place. You don't go there for long form comments and debates, but where do you go? Where do you
uh,
go?
podcasts. I go to
Podcast.
podcasts, and I seek to see if they also upload them on YouTube, and then the comment section is right there, and then you can have these long drawn out conversations, monster threads. Um, but I mean, that's me.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
ways. They're forums. Forums are great.
Yeah, forums are great. Yeah, that's a good spot.
They're awesome. This also ties into not necessarily watches and watch collecting as a hobby, but if you have the same sort of wisdom and knowledge and golden nuggets that you want to share with aspiring architects or watchmakers. So we're stepping a bit further back and we're saying not just watch collectors, but aspiring architects or aspiring watchmakers in your experience, because obviously you have a foot in both worlds, and within those two worlds, there's so many microcosms of different things that and skills that you've gained and learned over the years. Any advice or any wisdom that you want to impart to both, whether it's watchmaking or architecture, or roll it up into a burrito of wisdom, if you'd like.
Yeah, if you're an aspiring architect, get out. No.
Run, just
Run.
run.
No, I think boy, nuggets for architects. I think there's so much wisdom to impart, but ultimately find somebody you can learn from and go work for them. And just learn as much as possible, grow as an architect, and find yourself as an architect. And then decide to stay there, decide to go create your own firm, or decide to find the next firm that's gonna kind of help you grow and benefit yourself. And I think if you follow that path, it's gonna help you be pretty successful in the field. And I think the other advice for architects, and probably this is going to extend to designers, is to seek good and seek beauty. And so it's very simple to say, but it's very difficult to do. And when we seek to achieve good, there's so much that goes into that, whether it's working through our environmental impact through design and construction and manufacturing, to how do we create beautiful objects that inspire in the world that we live in. And I think that, like I said, this extends through design. I want to live in a beautiful place. I want to live with beautiful stuff. I want to be inspired by the environment that surrounds me, the objects that I use. And I think that as architects, as designers, we have an imperative to achieve that. It's really hard. It's incredibly hard. I I I joke that there's certain cultures I work with that say no to everything. But the reality is everybody says no to everything. That when you're a designer and you want to achieve something, you have to insist, you have to push, you have to sell, you have to do everything to strive for that good design, for that beautiful design. Because if you give up at any moment, like I said, I could have stopped doing what I was doing at any of these junctures. Well, that's it. You didn't get to good.
Hmm.
And so it's an incredible effort to do these things. And you have to be ready to fight the good fight and strive for that.
Beautifully said. I by day I'm a producer, and that means schedules, and it means figuring out timelines and doing work backs and building out roadmaps and getting estimates from people. And I have had my fair share of conversations where I wanted to say, "Hey, Matt, this is good enough."
Yeah.
And the first time I said that, I had a rude awakening. I was talking to some 3D artists, some modelers, and as a producer, I have a timeline, and the goal is to keep us within that timeline. We have a date, and there's not just the thing in front of us, but there's things behind that that still need to get done, and sometimes uh, an asset will pass through multiple hands, multiple teams. And the first time I said it's good enough, I learned a very, very valuable lesson. It wasn't malicious. I didn't say it as like, I don't care about this. I really do. But then I tried to put myself into the shoes of a designer or an artist and understand that this is an object that has been created out of the creativity or the hands of this individual person, and saying it's good enough really hurts. So I find creative ways of delivering the same core message, but thank
We're
you
out of
for
budget. We're out of time. I'm really sorry.
too close to home. Let's move on amicably and never talk about this again. But I do, I am curious, and I have to ask, and I apologize in advance, but without prying, is there anything that you can tell us about what you're currently working on, or perhaps will work on in the future at Tipsim? Any sneak peeks that you can share, or any
With total
teasing?
delight.
Yes, okay,
I
wonderful.
I love sharing. Um, right now, the prime project is obviously the time traveler.
Mhm.
So gotten out people with their deposits. We're starting in on manufacturing, and of course, this is the my first foray into designing, engineering, and manufacturing a module or mechanism that changes a movement. And so I collaborated with over Zach Smith over at Hours Precision in Ohio, and he and I developed a mechanism to apply to a Salida SW330 and to create a 2 hour hand. So it's not a 24-hour GMT, but it's two 12-hour hands to tell two different time zones. So a dual time watch. It definitely has its travel function to it. And so this is in the process. Everything's being built, and in a couple of months, I'll have everything ready and start to assemble and deliver these to my clients. Um, Beyond that, I've got a couple of projects coming up. First one is it's a kind of mid-century design watch, working on something that is close to my heart as an architect, looking back to the Bauhaus movement, mid-century architecture, Max Bill and his influence onto Young Huns and watches in general, design in general. And so I've created what I'm calling the Architect's Watch, and this is my opportunity to create uh, an homage to that design ethos. Very simple time only watch that I'm gonna to issue, and my intent here is to celebrate architects through it. And so if you're an architect and you want this watch, there's going to be an architect discount, and I'm
Awesome.
gonna put one out there, and I'm gonna give one to a recent architectural graduate each year, just to get a watch out there to get architects enthusiastic about design and watches. So this is
Bravo.
in the process. At the same time, I'm working on a smaller dive watch. So the 200M, it's a 39 millimeter dive watch, 200 meters of water resistance. Now I'm looking at the 100M. So this is my skin diver. This is going to be 100 meters water resistant. It's going to be 36 millimeter, very small, compact dive watch, time only with a 12-hour bezel with countdown. And so my
Sick.
thought process here is I'm going to the Caribbean. I don't care what date it is. All I
Hmm.
care about is the time, probably vaguely, and maybe I want to know what my home time is.
Hmm.
And I'm going to go scuba and I'm going to have fun. And so what's my watch for that trip? So this is kind of fun. They're both in the process of prototyping. And then I alluded to what's in the future. And I've got two projects, probably in the long-term works. The first is I obviously we're here in Seattle. We're by
Hmm.
the water. I've got kids. We love going down to the beach. We love low tide, and I want to know when low tide is. And so I think one of the next watches is one of my kind of another use case close to my heart is what would be my tide watch, and what's that going to be? And so I inspired by things like the Salunograph, Mariograph, and all these old Hoyers and Abercrombie watches. Um, Thinking about what would I do at this time to start to pay attention to the tide and provide something that's functional to my life as where I live and what I do. So this will be a fun little project. Um, the other one that's probably a little bit longer term is, like I mentioned, the perpetual calendar.
Hmm.
And so this wasn't just an example of wouldn't it be great to do this? This is
Hmm.
something that I'm working on, and it may manifest itself as collaborating with a Swiss brand to develop the perpetual calendar. But similarly, it might also manifest itself working with Zach Smith and developing our own perpetual calendar module and coming up with something that it doesn't need to be only found in a Typsim watch, but if we come up with a module that fits onto an ETA, I would love to see micro brands across the world coming out with perpetual calendars and break that price point of 10,000 down to something different.
That is wild. That is you. I've asked for one teaser, and you've given us a proper cornucopia with like a bombshell at the end. That is very cool. That is very cool. Thank you for sharing. Like legit proper. That is awesome. And a sub 10K perpetual calendar movement that that would I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but it would revolutionize and open the floodgates to what types of watches we could see in the future with this movement and
Right,
complications.
it'd be
That's
cool.
wild.
So, I mean, don't hold your breath. I think this will be a long prototyping and development process, but let's see what happens.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Thank you once again for sharing. Again, I asked for a little bit and you gave me so much. And I think our viewers and our listeners would be very appreciative. Thank you. One thing I
Yeah.
haven't asked you so far though,
No.
what watch are you currently wearing?
Yeah, what am I wearing? So I've got my Tipsim Time Traveler prototype.
Very
This
cool.
is one of one at this point.
Awesome.
And I swap out the dials frequently. I've got the white, the champagne, and the black. And right now I've got the black gilt on. And I've got to test that module, that mechanism, make sure that it endures everything I do. And I do everything with it.
I love it so much. Thank you for sharing. Again, we've seen a prototype one of what I love the fact that you're such a watch nerd. It's like, yeah, what I just swap the dials periodically. Yeah, I just test it out. It's what I do. It's a regular Thursday. I have the time. I'm just gonna swap out the dial. Yeah.
Yeah, you
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you. Matt, you've done it. As a thank you, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to talk about something that you feel passionate about, or something you'd like to shine a light on.
Yeah.
This could be anything. It could be a local nonprofit or your favorite movie that you just can't stop thinking about. Quite literally, the floor is yours. Please.
Huh. Well, I maybe if you let me share three things, maybe two.
Yes,
I don't know. Let's
please.
see where it goes. Let's talk about design a little bit.
Hmm.
And in architect school, I did study in Japan for a summer, and one of the most influential books of my time was In Praise of Shadows by Tanizaki. So this is it's a reflection on imperfection, on balance and beauty and time. And I think it's an easy read. It's short, but it's profound. And I think it's a lasting impact on me and how I live my life, how I design when I design. And I want to point it out. I want to highlight it. I want to share it. I want to encourage people to go get this book and to read it. I think it talks about the importance of enjoying imperfection, the darkness in things, not having a bright spotlight, perfect and new. And I think it's a really beautiful reflection on how to live and how to design. And then as a local organization, so if you think it's not enough for me to do watchmaking, start a watch brand, be an architect, I'm
What have you done?
also a contramestre in a Brazilian martial art. I don't know if you've heard of capoeira,
Of
but this
course, I know. Yes, I know. Eddie Gordo, Tekken.
nice. That was my first teacher was the guy that did Eddie Gordo.
Wh- Are you serious?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
motion capture
yeah.
was
That was the guy. That's where I started. I have a new teacher now, and I would love to take a moment just to highlight this group. This is something I'm
please.
equally passionate about. I love to do it. I train and I teach every week, and So there's a group here. It's Seattle Capoeira Center, and it's over in the Mount Baker neighborhood. Terrific, terrific thing to do. It's a multifaceted activity. You get to sing in Portuguese, speak Portuguese, be acrobatic, learn to fight, and do it all with a smile on your face. It's great.
That sounds incredible. That sounds incredible. I might actually reach out to you because I've been considering doing some sort of martial arts, and capoeira has always been a very beautiful art form, not just
Yeah,
self-defense. But I don't know what it means. You tell me. Troca de cordões.
that's when you change your cord or change the
Ah,
belt. Yeah.
okay, okay, okay. That's so crazy and wild. This has not been rehearsed. We never talked about this. That is wild. First off, the guy that did Eddie Gordo motion capture was your original teacher, and now we're here. That's
There you
so
go.
wild. Incredible. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing. Matt, you are amazing. I appreciate you joining us today. Thank you for sharing your stories and for giving us some of your precious time. Any questions for me or parting thoughts you want to leave with us?
No, I mean, I've talked more than enough, but I've loved it. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
I mean, I hope you enjoyed it, and I personally loved the time that we spent together. And hopefully we'll do this again and have a follow-up sometime in the future.
Oh yeah, I hope I can tell you all about building something or other and the crazy story that went with it.
Heck yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Everyone, thanks for spending some time with us. Please show your support and check out Matt and his awesome watches on Instagram at Typsim Watches. That's Typsim, or online on the website at tipsim.com. Give him a follow, ask him questions, and tell him that the time has sent you. That was incredible. That was so
Good.
cool. Dude, that's wild. Capoeira, are you? Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah, been doing that for like 20.
That concludes this episode of the Timist Podcast Series. A sincere thank you for hanging out with us. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, then please push all the buttons that will help you hear more of us in the future. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can either drop a comment on the associated YouTube video or reach out to me on Instagram at TheTimistIG. Thanks for listening. I'm The Timist. Be well, and I'll catch you in the next one.